Lightfoot representative contacted me last week to reach out and introduce themselves and start this process moving forward on a good collaborative effort. Normally, I will say that it's very difficult for states to involve themselves in Department of Justice criminal actions. They keep them very close and they do not allow us into the negotiation room. In this particular case, we had a little bit of influence over what went into the plea agreement, a small section of it. What we were able to accomplish is get our ability to coordinate on these projects on behalf of the Virginia communities. So the Natural Resource Trustee Council and Natural Resource Damages. The council is composed of DEQ, North Carolina DNR, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service with cooperation from Duke. And we are tasked to assess, restore, replace, or seek compensation for natural resource damages damaged by the spill pursuant to the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act. The natural resources that we're looking at that have potentially been affected by the spill include fish, migratory birds, wetlands, floodplain, aquatic and terrestrial plants, invertebrates, surface water, and sediment. That translates into what's called a service loss. It could be recreation, fishing, but those service losses include the habitat for the trust species, food and shelter for fish and shellfish and things like that, and again the recreational loss. That could be fishing, boating, hiking, hunting, or swimming. Duke has independently employed, as part of the stakeholder outreach effort, the University of Virginia's Institute for Environmental Negotiation. I think that group has been very effective at communicating their thoughts, their values, and their ideas about what projects would best support Danville's, South Boston's, and the other communities' concerns. It's pretty broadly represented. There are 18 members, and as I had mentioned, they have already offered up 26 potential project recommendations. The most current activity by the trustee council has been the recent publication of the damage assessment plan, which is available for public comment. Instead of getting into that plan in too much depth, because it's pretty thick stuff, what I did is I provided you this graphic. If you look on the right side, and I'm sorry, it's a little bit fuzzy, but the resources are categorized in three areas: surface water, geologic, and biological. What that amounts to is basically the resource of water, sediments, benthics, fish, and other wildlife. As you keep moving further to the right, it basically describes the process that they're going to assess the injury to the Dan River. And they describe in very short terms how they're going to go about doing that. If you look at the assessment plan itself, it walks the reader through that. And again, comments going to be open until July 17th, 2015. So to the extent that you've got ongoing interest, I would encourage you to have a look at that, provide comments, as well as to members of the public that are here today. So this slide's provided because this is another funding mechanism that has resulted from the Dan River spill. At Duke's initiative, they have established the Water Resources Fund. They did this in October 2014, and it was funded initially with $10 million, with $1.5 million specifically dedicated for the Dan River Basin. The announcement for this came along with the announcement of the fund came along with the announcement for $500,000 in funding to improve Alba Grove Park at that time. So that happened fairly early on in the process. This particular fund, Water Resources Fund, is focused on water quality, water quantity, and conservation, fish and wildlife habitat, expanding public use and access to waterways, and increasing awareness and protecting water resources. It's managed by the North Carolina Community Foundation, which is composed of 2 Duke employees and 5 environmental community members. I'll note also that the latest round of funding included 2 Virginia projects, including a Riverwalk project in Danville, as well as another $100,000 to protect the critical acreage under the Conservation Fund in Virginia. Public comments. We received 8 comments. The highest areas of interest include the amount of assessment provided in the consent order does not adequately address damage to natural resources, economic loss, and other areas of liability, and the potential for double crediting among the various funding streams that we have discussed a little bit earlier. So with respect to the first one, I looked at this really closely, and the most accurate response that I have is that when you look at the consent order and what it is designed to do, it resolves violations of the state water control law. That's all it does. It doesn't attempt to resolve natural resource damage. That's what the Natural Resource Trustees Council job is going to do. It doesn't resolve criminal matters. The Department of Justice took that on, and notably, the agency doesn't have criminal jurisdiction. So there's no way that we can tap into that. To the extent that there's a comparison between, the POP that you look at from the plea agreement and having this really large assessment to it, and then looking at the violations that we have here, they're designed for different purposes. So it's important to note when looking at these comments, our response was back to them was along the lines of this consent order only resolves the violations of the state water control law and is within the bounds of the authority provided to us by statute. It's not designed to do anything else. Now, it can be confusing because we've opened that door to additional projects, and I think that's where some people develop a nexus. We don't think that $2.5 million is going to put enough projects on the table, okay, in order to accommodate all the stakeholder interest groups. Hopefully what we've done, though, is we've added additional money to the pot for those communities to reach out and have additional projects in conjunction with some of the other funding mechanisms that we described during this presentation. Where double counting is concerned, I'll just reiterate that the way we responded to that, and there weren't as many comments on that, I think we had 1 or 2. We took 2 of the projects out of the appendix that were obvious expenditures because the money had already been spent. Duke agreed to that, and we also have language in the consent order that we hope and we believe could preclude additional double counting in some areas. And to the extent that there needs to be additional transparency to how money is being spent and precluding crediting, I am hopeful that the spreadsheet that they have discussed with us will provide some transparency. That ends my presentation. I'm open to any questions that you might have.
I have a quick question. The projects that are on the list, my understanding is those are created by localities, stakeholders in Virginia. They were not created by Duke. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
The ones that we've looked at.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just curious, by looking at the list of projects, and is there a priority? I know water quality is the main issue here, but is there a priority rating on these, and how do you decide who gets to the top?
That's a great question, and I think it's going to depend on the funding source. Okay, so the Natural Resource Trustee Council, which at the end of the day, once the injury process is complete and things are starting to get monetized, okay, that criteria, the prioritization that you're talking about, is established under CERCLA, the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation Liability. And they have to stay fairly strictly in conformity with that process. So the nexus, which is what you're talking about, is probably going to be more closely aligned to water quality and recreational projects. To the extent that you look at the appendix, though, some of those projects satisfy a lot of different categories. Those are probably going to score a little bit higher. And that's just based on experience, working in the NRD world. Now, if you go to the Water Resources Fund, or you look at the consent order, okay, the criteria there is pretty broad. And it was designed that way, so that it could capture more and more of these projects that we hope are going to benefit those local communities. So it goes back to which source you're looking at. It's confusing. I mean, the legal landscape revolving around this spill, because it was cross-jurisdictional, you're dealing with criminal, you're dealing with civil, you're dealing with federal and state agencies. It's a lot to digest. It's a lot for an attorney to digest, and then you involve lay people and people that have been affected by this, and it gets really confusing very quick. A big part of what we've tried to do in our communications out in the public with folks is try to reduce that confusion as much as we can.
Thank you.
But
Any other questions?
I do. How big was the fish kill in this event?
I'm going to point to John Kennedy, who's available. Just listen. I'm pretty sure he has an answer for that too.
I apologize for being a little late, hoping to miss any questions during your early part of your presentation. I'm John Kennedy, I'm the Director of the Office of Ecology, DEQ. We had a crew out 1 week after the incident. We had a fish collection crew out. There were no observed dead fish in the river. Follow-up monitoring also concluded that there was no acute impact to shellfish. If there was any smothering just due to the physical coverage, that occurred way upstream, right in the area of the spill up near Eden. What we saw in Virginia waters was more or less a transport of more of a dissolved material that was carried in the water column and spread out over basically 75 to 80 miles of the river. But we haven't documented any widespread impacts, no fish kills to date.
Okay, hold on. You've got two endangered mussels and one, let's call it a half, he's halfway there to being classified as endangered. How are those doing now?
They actually undertook and cost shared a mussel survey. They got an independent environmental firm out of North Carolina to do that. They didn't document any direct impact on any endangered species. The two in particular, the green floater and James River spiny mussel that you mentioned is also an endangered fish, the Rhone blood perch. They've not detected any direct impact to those aquatic resources. They did document a fair number of unknown species that are fairly rare, both in North Carolina and Virginia as a result of the survey.
Okay, so the damage to the living organisms in the river wasn't as severe as the.
If you use lethality as the endpoint, correct.
Okay, so this looked pretty bad, but maybe wasn't as bad as it looked.
Not using that metric, no. We are still investigating
Okay.
long-term fish health, fish
Alright.
community structure, macro bird.
That leads into my next question. How much of this coal ash is still in the river, in the sediment in the river?
Based on the estimates that Duke gave us for the 3 recovery areas that they actually dredged and the recovered sediment and solids out of the wastewater treatment facilities, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 90% of the material is still in the river system.
Okay, so it's still in there somewhere.
Yes.
Is it showing up downstream gradually, or does it just seem to be permanently sitting?
EPA and their contractors were doing river transect surveys. At the most, in the beginning of the incident, they were up to 34 transects, starting in Eden, going all the way down to the reservoir. Over time, they've gotten to the, never did we see values higher than the high teens in terms of percent content of ash. Those values now are down in most cases to single digits or non-detectable. And that's due to the fact that we have native sediment now that's been covering the ash material, as well as it's been worked into the system and so somewhat homogenized.
Okay, so we've got a steady but declining flow of ash coming down the river.
We suspect that's the case. We also have a 2-dimensional model that was developed at Duke's expense, a 2-dimensional transport model, the University of Mississippi and the Vicksburg Waterways Engineering Station, USGS, Corps of Engineers. And we're expecting to see some of the results of that model within the next month or 2.
Okay. All right.
And what that will do is it will predict if there are pools or eddies, places in the future that we may want want to focus subsequent ash survey work, those might be the likely places where the material will pool and show up. Where it showed up logically in large volumes was the backwater behind Schoolfield Dam,